Welcome to C Squared Biz Growth Iron Sharpens Iron podcast, where CEOs and entrepreneurs share how they are overcoming business growth and sustainability challenges.
Welcome to the C Squared Biz Growth Iron Sharpens Iron podcast. I am your host, John Hale III, and today we have a great guest with us, Mr. Joseph A. Ruffini. Joe is a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, and Joe, we wanted to thank you for your service for our country, and I think you can let us know, I think it was 30 plus years. Joe is the author of two published books. The first is When Terror Comes to Main Street, A Citizen's Guide to Terror Awareness, Preparedness, and Prevention. And the second book, Osama bin Laden, His Death and the Future of Al-Qaeda and the Islamist Jihad. Joe has provided anti-terror and corporate security training to Fortune 500 companies, including U.S. Steel, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, General Electric, ExxonMobil, Wells Fargo, FedEx, Raytheon, and more. Joe is the founder of JPR and Associates, LLC, a business consulting firm that focuses on C-level coaching, leadership development, and training in the private sector, military, government, and law enforcement. And Joe has also coordinated and conducted numerous corporate culture 360-degree corporate assessments. Most importantly, Joe is a husband and a father. Hey, Joe, I wanted to state a current context for CEOs in today's environment as we pose this question. CEOs are charged with growing a company's revenues and profitability while facing headwinds, global competition, cost-conscious consumers, and a myriad of geopolitical, economic, and cultural issues. You know, one thing that I really took a look at, Joe, that doesn't get covered a lot is that according to the Intelligence and National Security Alliance's Insider Threat Subcommittee in May 2001, approximately 1 to 3% of our 21 trillion plus GDP is subject to intellectual property insider threat in terms of this theft of companies' intellectual property. And I wanted to discuss that today and get your thoughts on insider threat from the government and from the corporate perspective. And as we kick off the conversation, could you just give us a sense of what is insider threat? What's a working definition that we should have?
Insider threat basically is a person that is employed or contracted or consulting for a enterprise, a public enterprise, a private enterprise, or a government organization that, for whatever reason, either recruited by a foreign intelligence service,
right,
a competitor willing or offering a lot of money, disgruntled with the organization and the people that she or he are working with. And there's a myriad of reasons, but the bottom line is they will seek to steal, in the case of the private sector, intellectual property, proprietary information. In the case of the government, classified information. And this is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. We're all aware of the NSA Snowden and Kelsey incidents. Okay. And the thing that I think mostly sets these insiders up for doing and succeeding in what they're doing is both the private and public sector have very, very sound and logical guidance and procedures for detecting and reporting insider threat. The problem is a lot of times, John, human nature. For instance, let's say you and I are working in the same corporation, okay?
Okay, yeah.
And I observe that you come in 2 hours earlier than most people, and you're at the copy machine, and you're copying files from the corporation. Or I'm ready to go at night, and you say, Joe, I want to take off early tomorrow. I'm going to stay a couple hours and do some extra work. But I observe things in you, my coworker and buddy, that really don't pass the sanity test. I got to say to myself, why is John doing this stuff? And a lot of times, John, human nature, what it is, you being my friend and coworker, I'm going to say, you know what? It's probably just me. It's probably just nothing.
Right.
I'm not going to confront you, and I'm not going to confront reporting to the corporation. Fast forward several months when, for whatever reason, you get caught.
Yep.
And you get arrested,
yes,
and I get interviewed as your coworker.
Right.
I can say what a lot of people say, I worked with John for a long time. We were co-workers, and I just thought he was putting in extra hours because he was a really dedicated employee.
Right.
I never suspected And that seems to be a persistent
So
problem.
that's a
People
pattern
have
that
to
you see.
understand that when it comes to, because let's face it, John, when I, as a private sector employee, protect intellectual property and proprietary, I am preserving my job. I'm saving my ability to win contracts with the company, my future, my pay raises. There's so much that affects, both individually and a group. So, I think human nature, based upon my experience, is one of the things that prevent obvious insider threats from being reported.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Joe. And when you were in the military, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
What led you to this line of work? What led you to the passion that you clearly have, that you exhibit, obviously, by writing, speaking, training about this? You've made this part of the mission of your career, or your calling, so to speak. What drew you to this type of work, and what really keeps you focused here?
That's a really good question, John. Towards the latter part of my military years, I was a subject matter expert for the Army in information operations and psychological operations, and some other things that involve strategic communications and how people that manipulate information work. And you can see this in the alleged interference with U.S. elections the last 8 years by some foreign national countries.
Interesting. So from a, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead, John.
I was going to ask you, so from a civilian standpoint, you started to give us an example there. How does that translate? So as a civilian, for the work you were doing, what would that mean to us? So you gave an example of foreign elections. Are there other examples that as a civilian that we could understand, that type of work in the military?
Well, a lot of it has to do with America's increasing reliance on social media, especially some of the millennials and the Gen X. Here's the bottom line.
Right.
When you watch news from ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, there are lawyers that tell the reporters and the correspondents when there's a controversial story. Is it true? Is it not true? They have to go through a lot of legal wickets to be able to get on the air and say, this is a fact.
Right.
Unfortunately, more than 67% of Americans now get their news from social media, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. It's uncoordinated, unsubstantiated, goes through no legal review. So my fear is that those that wish to harm this great nation by manipulating information and therefore unnecessarily and wrongly giving Americans the wrong impression, the difference between truth and untruth. And unfortunately, John, in this information digital age we live in, perception becomes truth.
Yes.
So it's, what is the perception of CEOs? What is the perception of employees? What is the perception of the everyday Americans? And if the perception is, well, there really is no threat, it's business is business, I don't need to get involved, then to our adversaries that wish to collect on the government side classified information, and on the civilian side proprietary information, intellectual property,
makes it easier.
That just opens the door, because what they're dealing with is clueless employees and overall a fairly clueless population. And it's I'm not going to get into anything I shouldn't be talking about.
Oh, no, not at all. Go right. This is perfect.
Compare our Raptor fighter to the latest Chinese fighter. Compare our aircraft to the new generation of Chinese aircraft. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to look at those planes and go, we spent, 15 years and billions of dollars in research and development to produce this airplane, and somehow foreign national forces have obtained all the engineering information they need to reverse engineer and make a similar, and that doesn't register in the American mind.
That's a great example, Joe. It's a great example. And so part of what, if I understand, you're saying that if I, as an employee, am receiving more inputs and news from unfiltered sources, I could become unwittingly an insider threat, just in terms of my basis, attitudes, assumptions towards the institution, even towards the company that I'm working for.
Yes, and unwittingly, is the key here. It's kind of like social engineering. And again, may I provide an example?
Yes.
okay, you're a computer engineer with defense contractor X. I am an asset of a foreign adversary, and I want to get some technical scientific information from you that my country that's paying me and its industry needs. So I do some research on you, and I found out, you know what, John Hale went to Syracuse University, and he loves to hike, and he loves to fish, and he loves camping.
Right.
So I'll find out maybe what watering hole you go to with friends on a Friday night for a beer after work, and I'll sit next to you, and we'll just be talking, and I'll say, you know what, God, I'm working too hard. I really wish I could get back out in the wilderness and just do some camping where there's no iPhone and there's no email. And you say to me, oh, you know what, that's funny, I'm a camper. And we sit there and I buy you a beer, and as we talk, your wife is into this hobby. My God, John, my wife does too.
Right.
Your kids go to this school and they're doing acting and plays.
Right.
My God, John, I get to know you, and I get to be a very good friend of yours. And then as we meet and converse, I simply slide into our conversation. Well, John, you know, I do this. So what do you do? Now,
wow. So Joe, if I understand what you're saying, the foreign actors could be that sophisticated, be they work for a government or at a company.
Oh, absolutely.
To know who the competition is, who the specific employees I need to target to influence, to get them to unwittingly try to cultivate them to be an actual insider threat to their country or to their company.
Absolutely. And that's why companies and their employees need to be educated on social engineering. Come on. We have read in open press year after year how sexual favors have brought in information. You know, here's what I tell people when I lecture.
Interesting.
All right, look at me. If I'm in a bar with a lot of young, handsome men, and I'm sitting in a bar and a beautiful young lady comes up to me and says, will you buy me a drink? And I look around at all these young, handsome guys. I'm not stupid. The first thing I say, John, it hasn't happened often, but it has happened. And what I say to this lady is,
wait, are you serious? This has happened to you?
Yes. When I was on the lecture circuit, and I would say to this lady, look, I'm flattered, but let me be honest with you. I would not have a drink with a woman whose standards are so low that she would want to drink with me.
You really said that to her?
No, I'm serious, because any good-looking woman that would come up to a man my age I don't trust, John, I've been at this game too long. You're not going to get a thing out of me. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to buy you a drink. Now, if a 90-year-old woman comes up to me in a bar and says, would you buy me a drink? My answer is, certainly, my dear. Do you want a cherry in your ginger ale? You know, how do you want your Shirley Temple? John, I know how the game is played. I work with the U.S. government. I have a security clearance, and I know what the games are, and I'm not going to play them. You want to get the information, you're not going to get it from me.
Interesting. So when you're counseling CEOs of some of these Fortune 500 companies or coaching and part of that anti-terrorism training, that's part of these are the type of stories that you share with them.
No, I do. What I tell them is,
so if I'm a CEO of a company, realizing you're a target, you may think you're all that in a bag of chips and really good looking and really this and that.
If you are C-level in a corporation, if you are a executive VP, senior VP, you are always a target for proprietary information, intellectual property, and you just need to keep that in the back of your head. The bottom line is, John, if the situation you're in feels too good to be true, and I'm going to go back to the attractive young lady that wants you to buy her a drink, which works a lot of time. If it seems too good to be true, if it seems, kind of out of the everyday ordinary, then it probably is. Don't take the chance.
So as guys, we should just, as they say, check our ego at the door. Or just we're not all that.
Absolutely. What I tell people is, when I get up in the hotel in the morning and I put on the shaving cream and I take all the whiskers off and I go like this and look in the mirror, I'm still the same old guy I was when I checked into the hotel. And that ain't going to change at night in the bar, right?
Gotcha. Well, thank you for sharing that, Joe. In kind of your background experiences. The question I had was, in terms of the insider threat landscape, we hear a lot of information, but who are the policymakers in the U.S.? Who are the regulators? And from an enforcement standpoint, How is that typically carried out?
Well, and that's a challenge. The U.S. government, and I won't go into the detailed document because, to be honest with you, I can't remember all 20 or 30 of them offhand. But there is ample security guidance at the national, at the DOD, really at the corporate, any level you can think of. The challenge is most corporations and the government every year, whether you're a government employee or contractor, you have to go online and you have to learn. You have to take the cybersecurity course, the insider threat course. You take the course, you answer questions, you get a certain percentage, you get issued a certificate. And that checks the block for your agent or whomever you work for. I took the training. Joe Ruffini took the training. He passed the training. And unfortunately, John, that's about all the emphasis I will see for another year. Did you take the training, Joe, as a contractor? Did you pass it? Yes, I did.
Okay, so so then either at a major, where there's major or mid-level corporation or the U.S. government, then you have as a manager, supervisor, or if I'm part of a internal controls or function, if you will, internal security function, John Hale and Joe Ruffini, they've checked the box, they've complied. Good. We kind of move them into that folder and we're kind of done with them. We don't touch them for another year.
Well, and the other problem is, and I'm not gonna name specific government employees or the agency.
Oh no,
but I can tell you from my experience, I reported to a security chief at an agency contractor who, when you take the insider threat for the government, they tell you what the perfect target is for a foreign intelligence agency. And I reported this individual, said, here's his federal back taxes, considerable. Here's his state back taxes. Here he's being sued by a prime contractor for not, I said, everything that you tell me in this yearly brief that says this individual is a prime target to be paid by a foreign intelligence service and compromise government classified information. I said, it's all textbook. It's here. I've given it to you. And the individual told me, and I still can't believe this, unless he self-reports, I'm not going to do anything about it.
Right. So for the audience, so we understand then having those liabilities that someone could find out with minimal level of research, I imagine that person could be blackmailed because of that, or in terms of if I'm offering them money, they can make all these problems go away to the right penny, right?
In this case, John, I think what it was is this particular security executive did not want to admit to his superiors that he hired a contractor that was a foreign intelligence threat. So nobody wants to be the guy that goes forward and says, whether government or private sector, oh my God, I screwed up. I hired this woman, I hired this gentleman, and now I think I made a mistake. He is a threat. And this gets back to another thing. I'm very surprised at how many boards of directors and CEOs do not do full background checks on men and women that they hire as EVPs, SVPs, directors, C-levels. I mean, I'm shocked. Did you do a background check? Well, no, she was a CFO here and a COO here and a CISO here and a VP here. My God, she's got great credentials. Well, you didn't answer my question, CEO.
Right.
Where's the background check? You have a fiduciary responsibility to protect this company, to protect its employees, to protect its bottom line. And that means when you're going to hire somebody and pay them a six-figure salary, make sure that there's no skeletons in the closet, at least within what you and I, John, would know as good standards of due diligence.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Mid-Tier Advocacy. Mid-Tier Advocacy, or MTA, is a 501c3 nonprofit. It is the leading advocacy organization that has been the forefront of leveling the playing field for advanced small and mid-tier companies in the federal government contracting space since 2010. By briefing Congress and reaching out to federal agencies to engage in policy discussions that address the constraints on firms that are deemed too big to be small and too small to be big. MTA is the collective voice of mid-tiers. CEOs reserve a seat at the upcoming MTA GovCon CEO Exclusive Summit to be held at the Tower Club in Tysons Corner, Virginia, happening on March 25th, 2025. Receive your discount by purchasing your ticket at midtier.org. That is MIDTIER.org. add the code Cornerstone, CORNERSTONE, in the comments section and receive a $20 discount on the Day 1 event or the Capitol Hill Day event on March 26th, in addition to the early bird price while it lasts.
Okay.
Right. So then if I understand you, Joe, then maybe a recommendation or a best practice to a CEO would be make sure within their corporate culture and environment, when they're bringing on individuals at the C level or maybe a level 2 before that with an EVP or senior this or that they hire a firm and just don't do kind of a LexisNexis kind of background check or a drug test, where they do hire a firm that does a real in-depth type of background check.
Well, absolutely. If you have a multi-million-dollar, even billion-dollar corporation, where's the trade-off? I'm going to hire a private company for $20,000 to do an in-depth background check on a potential C-level I'm bringing in at $300,000 or $400,000 with benefit salary a year. Is that $20,000 worth not doing that and having that C-level go to a competitor and absolutely compromise my software, my proprietary code? Let's do a cost-benefit analysis.
Right.
Let's look at the return on investment. $20,000 to ensure that your C-level is going to be loyal and not violate the law. Really, John, in my opinion, it's beer money. It's nothing. All right.
Right. So kind of a recommendation or one takeaway for the CEO for him or her is to make sure that they have a rigorous background check process in place and hiring a professional firm that does this. Yes, we have a slew of attorneys, or we have our main outside firm, et cetera. But you're saying we should hire a firm that specializes in risk, counterparty risk, insider threat risk, et cetera, to really focus on the background check for their individuals and maybe even some of their top vendors and contractors as well.
I'll go one step further, John. I wouldn't leave it to the CEO. I would make it a board of directors directive to the CEO. You will do the following when you're hiring, and pick it. Maybe a senior VP, EVP, C levels.
Right.
Directors, whatever the board of directors is comfortable with. But yeah, I think that should be mandated by a watchdog board of directors, again, as opposed to a lapdog board that basically just goes with what the CEO wants. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. That's a great recommendation. Another question kind of comes to mind in just reading the papers and the press today, that workplace policies are all the rave here. Very popular topic in terms of moving out of post-COVID, and should the CEOs of various companies and governments, local and national, should they maintain some type of hybrid work environment, or should they require a 100% in-office work environment? And from an insider threat standpoint and perspective, what are the considerations for either the hybrid or the 100% work in office environment for employees? Is insider threat still there? Is it greater for either hybrid or when it's 100% employees in the office?
That's a very good question, John. And when it comes to working in the office, if you have a good, what I'll call information system security officer or manager, a chief information security officer, when you have everybody in the workplace, the technology and the audits are there to where you can even get down to monitoring keystrokes. You could tell if employees are spending too much time on social media, and I've witnessed this before, people running their own private business from either a government cubicle or a private site. When you get into the telework and the remote work, now it gets a little more challenging. And then the challenge is, really, if I was a CEO, and I would pay big bucks for whoever runs my IT, because you got to hire somebody who is extremely certified and extremely knowledgeable. And I would submit this, John, you need somebody running your information technology who will speak truth to power, who will not hesitate behind closed doors to look at the CEO and say, let me tell you, John, if you want to do this, fine, you can do this. But I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. It's going to do this damage to the company, and it's going to fall back and bite you in the backside. That's the kind of IT gal or guy you want. And when it comes to remote work, my questions, and I'm an operator, I'm not an IT expert.
Sure.
But if somebody's working from home First of all, I want a virtual private network. I want a secure way of them getting into the company.
Right.
If it was me, I would have the software to monitor their keystrokes. I want to know exactly where they're going and what they're doing when I'm on my company network. And the other thing that both in government and private sector that should be done but is not done with remote employees, you tell your employees what your deliverable expectations are for that week.
Yes.
So, all right. And I do this when I'm a consultant. I note every day for my client everything that I have done from the time I start, which is noted, till the time I finish. There's objectives that I have accomplished.
Right.
So if I'm supervising teleworkers, I'm going to tell my managers, don't let them run willy-nilly. The Friday before, you tell them what you expect them to accomplish by close of business on Friday. And the stipulations are, if you're not going to accomplish that by Friday, don't tell me Friday close of business. I want to know Thursday morning by the latest why you cannot accomplish it and the reasons why.
Right.
And we'll discuss it. But when you give employees specific things that they need to accomplish during the week, in my opinion, that's the only way you're going to know that they're actually being productive as a remote or as a telework. And there's a difference. Remote is you never come into the office.
Right.
You work full time.
Yep. Understood.
And telework is, some days at your home office and some days in the regular office. But this is a big, big fault in the government. There's agencies that let government employees telework 3 times a week. I know that. I've been in that environment. The contractors have specific things they need to report to their government boss.
Yes, they do. Yes,
but
they do.
I have seen too many government employees that telework 3 days a week and have absolutely no objectives assigned that must be accomplished by the end of the week. So,
Gotcha. So
it is what it is.
Right. So it sounds like then, just to summarize that, Joe, from a cultural standpoint, and particularly from an insider threat perspective for the CEO, in both cases, you need to have the software and information technology systems to be able to track the human behavior, if you will, in terms of the keystrokes, to make sure and to confirm that they're actually executing work projects and they're not, they're not shopping. They don't have another business. I've seen people walk out of the office for looking at inappropriate sexual content from work that was monitored. You're like, what happened to this person? Oh, they're gone. They get walked out of the building the next day.
John, it's not rocket science. We have the software. We have the technology.
Right.
The challenge is, as you know, we can buy audit software that track all this stuff. You also have to invest in people that can actually go through what the software is picking up and have the knowledge and the hours to go through and say, oh, okay, I see this individual. My gosh, he visited adult sites for an hour and a half during company time or client time that he charged. It's one thing to have the software. It's another thing to have enough of a robust IT staff to do what we get in the government called D-Log, go through all that stuff and be able to pick out the violations, summarize them, and then go to HR, the managers, the proper authorities, and take the appropriate action.
So it's a little bit of a combination of have the technology in place and the people, but then the culture and the willingness to be able to actually, from an enforcement standpoint, do that. That it
is. And if I can throw another thing in, John, the old saying, you get what you pay for.
Right.
If a company's going to hire a woman or a man to head up their entire information technology, hardware, software, and security, and they're going to pay them what I would consider to be at the bottom of the wage scale for that talent, you get what you pay for. And what I recommend to C-levels is you look hard, you recruit, you do background checks, and whatever woman or man that you hire to run this IT organization and keep track of things like insider threat, pay that person at the upper scale and not the lower scale, and provide a lot of benefits. For instance, if I was hiring you as my IT guru, one of my dangling carrots would be, I'll tell you what, John, you look good, you sound good, you got a good rep. For every year that this organization goes without a compromise, a threat of our data systems, an intrusion, a theft of our proprietary information. What every year that you can keep this from happening, I'm going to give you X as a bonus. Oh, now not only are you a professional, but I got that carrot dangling, and you want that extra $50K a year from the company. You bust your butt and you make sure it doesn't happen. I mean, we're all human, John. And if you pay me a good salary, that's great. You dangle a hell of a bonus in front of me. By God, I'm going to bust my butt further. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And it goes back to, these are great examples and best practices that CEOs have the authority and they should be able to put in to and really how to be proactive here for the threat, as well as insider threat. Joe, another question I had was, we touched on it a minute ago about these efficiency tools of social media, email, texting, cloud-based workplaces. It sounds like it's a combination of those are great tools. We just need to make sure as companies and as CEOs that we have the safeguards in place, guidelines in place. And if I read a little bit in what you're saying earlier about, hey, I took a test once a year, that there's more of a culture as it relates to insider threat, call it risk mitigation, risk management, that there's a culture that's developed there so it's touched and discussed more than once a year.
Yeah, that's a very good point, John. And if I was running a company, and to tie in with what you said, here would be my rules. We do not discuss or conduct business on social media sites, not Facebook, not TikTok, not Instagram. I mean, you name it. We do not do business over social media sites, period. We do not do business over emails that are not corporate emails, period. And what I would do is I would outline.
Hey, Joe, can I ask you a question on that? So I can't use my Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo to conduct work. When I was at the Department of Energy, people, we were briefed that that's a huge security threat to use anything other than a secure Department of Energy, email system.
Well, if you read the Gmail disclaimer when you sign up for an account, and nobody reads the thing, basically anything you put in a Gmail, the company running the platform has rights and access to. Basically, you sign your life away. So what I would do with my company and every employee indoctrination is, here are the rules that you cannot violate. And if you violate it even once, that is grounds for dismissal.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like, all right, I'll give you an analogy. I'm hiring a middle school teacher, okay? Right. And this is common sense. You will not do drugs with the students, and you will not have physical relations with the students. Now, you and I, that sounds totally obvious.
Sure.
But when you say these are grounds for immediate dismissal, it makes a point. And unfortunately, John, corporations do not have that same emphasis and that same, there's no gray area here. It's black or it's white. And I think that's why so many companies get compromised. They don't enforce in this day and age a black and white as opposed to a wishy-washy gray, if that makes sense to you.
Totally. That makes sense, Joe. And I think we've covered a lot of territory here today. So in terms of takeaways, if you will, for our CEO audience, I've got a couple I've been tracking here. Let me know if I missed something.
Go ahead.
So one is the board of directors, or the CEO should mandate this, but the board of directors, background checks from a professional security firm that deals with insider threat, counterterrorism, etc. One would be kind of for the hybrid work environment, especially, or if they're full-time out of the office, have the software technology, independent server track the various keystrokes, and have a culture and a willingness to actually get this done and enforce it if someone violates those policies. Part of this culture, again, is beyond just check the box. We had an online compliance, and John got, 7 out of 10 right in January, so he's good to go the rest of the year. But this should be a culture of recognition as it relates to risk awareness, risk mitigation. And that relates particularly to those of us who may be senior level employees, C-suite, just report to that, et cetera, should really be aware that we are targets. There are actors either at other commercial competitors, foreign governments, et cetera, that are actually targeting us in our industry because they know who we are. So they'll track our social media, et cetera. And the last one I had was, as it relates to the risk management function, view it as a real risk for function to the viability of the business, and actually pay those professionals, like you said, in your recommendations, at the higher end of the pay scale. A lot of times as companies, we think of, you've got this range of which quartile we want to track our senior executives to. And so you're saying for the IT and the folks in this field, in terms of threat awareness and mitigation, pay the people to get the type of talent you need, and have some incentive structure, kind of like a dashboard of KPIs that as they track to that lower or mitigate insider threat, no occurrences, that they're getting paid more.
John, you captured it all. One more thing, and it's not your fault. You didn't fail to capture. I failed to mention it.
Yeah.
When the man or woman that runs your IT comes to you and says, I need 4 more employees at this level to do this, the National Institute of Standards and Technology publishes security controls that are absolutely phenomenal. And
yes, they are.
You institute and keep up with all those security controls, your chance of a catastrophic intrusion or theft really goes down considerably. The problem is there are so many, over 200 of these controls and checks, that it takes a pretty good IT staff to actually monitor everything that needs to be monitored on a weekly basis. So when the IT guy comes in and says,
right,
hey, boss, I can't track this, I don't have enough people,
right,
that's not a BS line. It's one of the reasons why the government cannot secure its information systems and its computers. They know what to do. They don't have the money to hire government civilians or contractor experts to actually monitor and enforce all the controls. We know what to do, John. Right. We just can't pay for it, okay?
Right, and if you put that in an environment where you're a CEO, where the focus is how are you growing the revenue, how are you increasing profitability, et cetera, that becomes just as challenging an environment.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah, so great. Well, Joe, this has been fantastic. You had a story for us, or a stat I'd like for you to share. I can't recall the exact number about the kind of cost for insider threats and insider threat occurrences.
Yeah. According, and there's a lot of reports out there, both by the government and private sector think tanks, but the average intrusion and theft of proprietary information and or intellectual property for an enterprise, a private sector company, the average cost of that intrusion is between $4.2 and $5.8 million per incident. So again,
for a middle market company, growing company, that $5.2 million not only is a financial cost, but I guess there's also the reputational cost.
No, absolutely, and the kind of conundrum here is that if you are a privately held company, right, and you go public that you've been compromised, that's not good for investors, as you know. It's not good for the company reputation. If you're a defense contractor, and by regulation you have to report compromises and threat, but if you do that, now you're identified as a defense contractor that for whatever reason cannot protect the government information that's on your company systems. So there's a lot of incentive, I hate to say it, to be dishonest and not to report. Right. Private sector, it affects your stock. Government contractor, it affects your ability to get follow-on work. So in some senses, John, it's a self-defeating system, and you just have to count on the integrity and the professionalism of the women and men that run the companies and are responsible on the private side to the stockholders and investors, and on the government side to the United States citizens and the taxpayers.
Right. And last thing I want to leave us with is this is a thought that, CEOs don't operate in a vacuum. You mentioned it earlier. The CEOs report to a board of directors whose number one job is to hire and fire the CEO, and then, of course, have a strong corporate governance structure in place, independent corporate governance structure in place, and assist the CEO to strategically hit the company's goals. How should the board of directors respond in this environment as it relates to insider threat, and how can they be proactive?
That's a good question. I'm going to give you my opinion, and a lot of people may or may not like it.
Sure.
In a lot of board of directors, the members are chosen based on reputation. We have Lieutenant General so-and-so. We have the former deputy director of the CIA. Humma, humma, humma. And that's good. Okay, that's good publicly. But what I would challenge is that's fine to have names and celebrities on your board of directors.
Right.
I would hire my board of directors not only on their celebrity, but on their knowledge of what I think they need to know to, first of all, choose the right CEO, and second of all, to provide governance to that CEO and the company. So you can find celebrities out there that have areas of expertise.
Right.
I would submit to you that, unfortunately, and all too often, people are hired for boards based upon their reputation and their name in the public domain, but not necessarily their knowledge of what they need to do to give good guidance to that CEO and the company. So do you want the name, or do you want the name and the capability to move your corporation forward?
Right. To help. Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Joe. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, John. It's been a lot of fun. I enjoyed this.
Yes, it has. That's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to the C Squared Biz Growth Iron Sharpens Iron podcast. And check us out on social media, share, and subscribe.